conversation is. My guess is we'll be further along. I know that the survey that went out to parents is due tomorrow. So once we have all of that data, we'll have, several days to look at it and maybe have a more firm plan by next Monday. So I will make sure that once that's confirmed in the district calendar, that I send out a save the date so that people can show up and ask questions.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just get started. We've got quite a few on, almost 30. So I think I'll go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to say a couple of PTO reminders before Mr. Swiatowicz starts. First of all, yearbooks are for sale. So please, you can log on to the PTO website to find out how to order. It's very quick and easy. There's also photos needed for the yearbook. So please, if you have anything you'd like to share, if you want to see your children in the yearbook, please send those along. We'd love to have them. There's a list of photos that are needed that are also on the website, the PTO website, and we've sent some emails out about it as well. The other thing is school supplies are now for sale, so you can purchase those now for your children. And there's a deadline, but I think it's not until the end of the month, so there's time, plenty of time, and we'll be sending out reminders about that. And then the final thing is that all photo packages that were ordered are now at the front desk of the school. So your children can go and pick them up themselves, or you can swing by during school hours and grab them. But that's it for the PTO, and I'll pass it on to Mr. Swiatowicz.
Great, thank you. So welcome everyone. Hopefully you've all gotten the survey and responded to that. We're going to focus a majority of our time today, hopefully answering your questions, hopefully letting you know the thinking and the amount of thinking that we're doing, just as we did to start this school year, but with the potential of more students returning, what that looks like. We'll share some guidance. Actually, you know what, I'll start with that. So in case you are wondering, the conversation about barriers, et cetera, is coming up because of the New York State guidance. So the rules that we must follow are, if you can stay 6 feet away, you can do that with masks only. And that's it. So that's what we've been living up until this point in the year. We've had enough requests from families. We know it's best for students to be in the building as much as possible. So anytime you are less than 6 feet, there has to be a barrier. So we are in the process of counting the number of barriers that we would need, spacing in classrooms. That's where we're spending a lot of time right now. We're setting some model classrooms in our school. We're looking at the different sizes of furniture that we have in order to make sure that there is at least 3 feet of distance. But our goal as a school is to get to 4 feet of distance. And then it is masked and with a barrier. I have had some questions from our staff. So as I start to answer some of the other questions that come up today, I'm happy to put those in there as well. One person has asked, can we use a face shield instead of a barrier? And based on Westchester County, and it may be larger, but I know that at least in Westchester County, our superintendents have asked, and a face shield does not replace a barrier. So that's a no-go just in terms of barriers. So we are looking at some examples of barriers, and then the process will be ordering them and installing them, et cetera. So that is where we are right now. I do have 3 questions that came in to me ahead of time. So we'll start with those. One is an easy answer, and the other 2 are much more complicated. So we'll start with the easy question, which was, my question about reopening is about buses. Will there be an effort to lighten the load of students in the buses to avoid crowding? I would like to put my kids on the bus, but I'm nervous about this. Also, since the weather will be nicer in April and beyond, will you keep the windows open, et cetera? So the second part of the answer is definitely yes, windows will be opened. There's actually a hatch on the roof that stays open as well when the weather's nice to really move the circulation. I know you probably haven't been in school buildings this year, but there are requirements for air circulation in the buildings as well. Our blowers and our air handlers are very loud this year because of the amount of required circulation. So the same would go for our buses as soon as we can open those windows and we're not freezing the kids out. In terms of lighten the load of students on the buses, I don't think we're allowed to do that. We have to provide transportation and we only have a certain number of buses and a certain number of drivers. I can tell you that for contact tracing, when we find out that a student has ridden a bus, we ask the transportation company for the seating chart. They are able to tell us which row the student was in. So that will continue. Obviously, with more students on the bus, it does become a little more complicated, but we are quarantining everyone within 2 rows of that student who rode the bus. So that is our current practice, which will continue, but just as more students are on there, more students potentially will become part of the quarantine process. So that was the relatively easy answer. The other 2 are a little more complicated. Next question is, my hope would be that as we roll through this experimental phase, parents will be allowed the option to let their students Zoom from home, as is currently the case, if for any reason they become uncomfortable with the rollout, or maybe there's some kind of middle ground. So that we don't know yet, to be honest with you. The survey has gone out. We don't have all of the data yet. My guess is that our percentages will help drive what instruction looks like. If we have 95% of our students here in the building, that would probably be different than if we had 55% of our students in the building. So I think some of that will be driven by the percentage of students who we have in the building. I can't really go further than that right now because we may be in just a very different setup with, again, 4 feet of space with barriers. So there's a lot of complicating variables right now. I circled the term experimental phase. I think basically it would be that once we make a decision, that is the decision for the rest of the year. For the setup of our classrooms, it is very complicated to label our classrooms. We have tape on all of the floors just so that classrooms can easily be reset. So we will likely be redoing something like that. So to go between 4 and 6 is very, very complicated and very time consuming for our custodians. In order to figure out how many barriers we needed to take the maximum number of students that would be in each class. So we are looking at, just to back up what I was just saying about it being complicated, we're looking at 1,264 individual seats that would need to be ready in our building at any time if everyone were to come back. So that's the complicated variable. It's not just the 20 per classroom, it's the 20 times or 26 times, however many classrooms that there are. And the last one, probably even more complicated, to be honest with you, or not that complicated at all, depending on how you're looking at it. So I'm hoping Mr. Stratos will be able to address the uncertainty the new strains of virus have on the reopening, especially without the vaccine available to the students. I see more about new strains in the news, including one in New York. I don't think we would be even talking about further reopening if there was a lot of evidence of spread happening in our school buildings. I think a majority of the research that we are reading and hearing about has to do with a lot of the spread happening outside of the school building. So, with masks and with barriers, we think that there will be, the same, if not less, spread happening in our school buildings. So I don't think that the new strains are playing any part in that. But, if we were to go back to last August and say how much we've learned since we started the school building, things can change very quickly in this pandemic. So this is the best evidence that we have now. And if other data is coming out that says otherwise, then we will have to make an adjustment. We will not just move forward because that's what we've decided to do. So kind of a political answer there, but trying to just be as truthful as possible with our thinking moving forward. So those are the 3 questions that we've had ahead of time. I will encourage you to put your questions in the chat if you don't want to wait The other thing you can do is raise your hand on the reactions button. That puts you right to the top so I can see on the screen who has a question, and then I can just lower the hands as they go. So if you do have a question, you just want to hit the reactions button, raise your hand, you'll be there so that we can just have some sort of queue with the questions that people have. All right. All right, so we've got one from Lizzie Cooper. Go ahead, Lizzie.
Hi, I was at drop off this morning and I was like happy to see so many kids going back to school, which I think is great. But can you talk a little bit about the first thought that crossed my mind was if we are all in 5 days, what the traffic situation looks like. Would they stagger the start times the way the elementary schools did, or at least get a traffic cop on 121? Something would need to happen, I think, to ensure the safety.
Yeah, that is definitely something that we have raised in the reopening plan. I mean, the advantage of starting as early as we are is that we do have enough time to start to problem solve those situations. That's definitely a concern of mine as well. We have had a consultant from BOCES come out and help us with our traffic patterns and our entry and exit plans for the school throughout the year. But with potentially doubling up of traffic, it definitely is a concern of mine. Because I know our traffic probably is right about the entrance on a normal day now. So now if you're doubling or going back to the bus question, people say, I'd rather my kids not ride the buses, I'd rather drop them off. It's definitely going to be a concern of ours that there be some sort of traffic piece. I've gone up there and looked at the space, and although it is a state road, it is not very wide. So I honestly, that is a question that we have out there right now with what that's going to look like. But at the same time, we have made some adjustments over the course of the year. So earlier in the year, for those of you who were dropping off your kids, you notice that the buses came up out of our exit. So we've turned those around and they now leave through the high school exit because it matched the traffic pattern a little bit better. So we are not adverse to making adjustments. So that is just something that we will continue to do as we go. But again, that's a huge question. I think a lot of the questions that we have and that we're identifying really have to do with the before and after school. So right now, in the morning, we do have students socially distanced in the building if they get here early enough, just because the weather was really cold for a while. But again, when you think about doubling the amount of students who are getting off the buses, at least doubling, that's a lot more students outside. So again, just all things that we are considering right now. Hopefully that answers your question. I see Kristen. Taryn, if you want, you can either make me a co-host or if you want to lower people's hands after we answer, that'd be great. All right, Kristen,
Sure.
go ahead.
Good morning. My question's about the contact tracing. I noticed one of the questions on the survey dealt with, one of the reasons why a lot of people are keeping their kids out is to avoid contact tracing so that they then can't participate in activities outside of school or be in school again. Can you just go over what the current contact tracing protocols are? And also, do you think that they will be less strict going forward? Are they moving to try to have less people traced as a result of a positive case?
Yeah, I can't imagine, thank you for the question. I can't imagine that they're going to be any less strict. Right now, it is basically anyone within 6 feet, we are contact tracing. So at our building, you may have heard from your kids that they're in seats now in their classrooms, or at least their teachers do have to have seating charts for us. So we're doing that one of two ways. We either have the teacher will mark down the students and exactly where they're sitting as they come in for the day. That's what some teachers are doing, because then there's an attendance piece there as well. Others just have a set seating chart, probably like all of us remember. So that way we just have to check that against our attendance for the day. And then anyone within 6 feet is quarantined. So now that you are going to have students within 4 feet, then the group around probably that one student, et cetera, will be quarantined in some way. Our lunches we are doing in classrooms. The guidance is that as soon as masks are off, everyone in that space is quarantined. So we are quarantining entire rooms, lunch rooms of students. But again, as the weather gets nicer, we are hoping to take some classes outside. We do have the picnic tables that we did. We do have socially distanced spacing on the back of the school near the garden. So there's a little ledge there. So we do have students spaced out 6 feet there so they can be outside with their masks off. And again, if you're 6 feet, then you're good. So we are considering ways to spread that out, but we do only have a limited number of monitors, et cetera. So there is just there's a lot to try to figure out with who can go where. Is there a group of kids that's always outside, not always outside, et cetera. And then the next step to that is recess. So we will likely be moving toward a more active recess. We have just been doing some walking, but at the same time, we do have to be able to contact trace students. So we can't just have a free-for-all football game or soccer game, et cetera. So likely there will be maybe some like large squares painted on our backfield or something like that. And we would say just like stay in your area, but there can be a variety of games in those individual spots, or talking across areas or that kind of thing. So again, it's not ideal. I wish we could just throw a couple of soccer balls out there and say go and have fun, but we do still need to contact trace any students that did have that 10 minutes of interaction. So when you think about a football game or a soccer game, you can't really know. So you'd have to assume that there was that level of contact. So we're just looping that in with the students from that lunchroom.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I saw something came up. It says back to the traffic comment. Is there a way to get someone to direct traffic at dismissal? Turning left out of the school entrance is scary. One thought is to have exiting traffic be directed behind the high school where it's less congested. Yeah, we've thought about those type of things. So the first question is something that does sit at our district office level right now, just with, can we get somebody onto 121? We cannot put a teacher or a monitor out there probably. So it'd probably have to be a trained traffic person, again, through a security company or through the local police. So we're exploring our options there. And then I missed the other part of the question. As far as the back of the building, we do have our buses leave about 10 minutes after. So, and then you have people crossing, probably leaving that area. So I think the best thing right now is to continue to go up to the right. Otherwise you're crossing with buses, high school traffic, et cetera. Again, that's my quick reaction to that. Doesn't mean it can't change. I think the better solution is to have somebody at the end of the driveway just saying like, come on, and stopping traffic one way or the other. But I just don't know if that's going to be able to happen at this time. Okay, other questions that people might have? And again, these will likely change a little bit. Right now, I can tell you, and I mentioned this a little bit ahead of time, we are making sure that we can get it, again, to the best of our ability with the tables and desks, et cetera, that we have. We are setting up our classrooms. We are modeling what some of those setups might look like. So we do have a classroom right now set up just so that we can see that everybody did fit, et cetera. But then we have like a 4-foot table where you can only put one student at a 4-foot table. So, and then there's no aisle for that. So like, there's very complicating variables. And the last thing we want to do is have to order lots and lots of desks as well. We do have enough places for students to sit. It will be something that we will do if we need to. But I think that we have enough furniture in our building right now. We just need to make sure that it's spaced correctly or that we're matching things up that we find that have been distributed over time. Whoever's by the name of Rope, there we go. Beth, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? Good morning. Mr. Andrew Selesnik said something about using tents and potentially having class outdoors. we are a big fan of that idea. We're just wondering what you're thinking about that and how often it would happen, if it's totally weather dependent. And, then allergy season factors in, and when
Yeah.
they start sneezing, is that going to freak everybody out realistically?
I'll answer your last question first. Yes, probably. Um, so,
I mean,
yeah,
they'll
we've
have to
had some,
probably keep their masks on under any circumstances, whether they're inside or out,
that
but
is correct.
that would be a complication.
Yeah, that is correct. My understanding is that the tents are 20 by 30. I don't think we're looking at huge wedding tents or anything like that. I think the blueprint that I saw when we started looking at it is that we would have two, but I believe they would be on the back field. So there are complicating variables there with how long it takes to get there, how we get in and out of the building. Do we have students that have any are on crutches or anything like that that might take longer to get down there, et cetera. So I think that it's I look at it as kind of like a release valve for very compact classes. There might be classes, if you're in an earth science class, it might be a logical place to do your class that day. My feeling is that they would be weather dependent unless they were right next to the school. But again, we're on a hill here, so I don't see a lot of flat area for us to put tents right next to the school as well. So we don't know the answer to that yet, but it will have to fit kind of like the same expectations, whether you're in or outside of the building. My hope is that they are large enough to fit an entire class, but I've also seen in other districts, they're doing like chorus outside, right? So there are some other things that we can do. Maybe that just defaults to somebody's classroom when it's over 55 degrees and not raining outside. We also have the potential of doing lunch outside. So again, when we see the size of the tents and then we think about the arrangement of furniture and anything like that, it could be a really nice spot for us to do some lunches.
Okay. The only other question I had, the tents are they basically just like a flea market pop-up, like without walls, or are they like, I would assume that they would be cross ventilation?
I don't know the specifications, to be honest with you. I've seen I believe they're 20 by 30, but in
Mhm.
terms of walls and,
Right.
that kind of thing, I don't know
And
yet.
it's pointless to use a tent if it has walls, because the whole, you lose that benefit of being outside if they're.
Yeah, at least walls we could roll up. So if we
Yeah.
did need to use them for a rainy day, we could do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Will there be flexibility in bus decisions? For instance, if I say I do not want to take the bus, will I be able to change my mind and switch to the bus? Yes, absolutely. It is our requirement to provide transportation to and from school. So the bus drivers do still continue to have to drive past your bus stop every day, whether you are there or not. So absolutely, yes. If you do want to just follow up with our director of transportation after not being there all year, just to make sure that your kids do get the bus. Her name is Nora Beltran. She is very responsive. She's awesome. So if you are concerned about that after not being out there all year, I think you're going to be putting your child on the bus and you just want to make sure that they're stopping. Absolutely. She'll give you that peace of mind. I see there's somebody just named iPhone with a hand raised.
Sorry, that's me, Jeff. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, it's Claire. Good morning. Sorry, I'm on audio. Could you just say a little bit more, and I apologize if I missed it, when Dr. Selesnik was giving his presentation for the whole district, he was saying there could be some places where the distance might be under 3 feet. I actually had two questions. Could you say a little bit more about whether that would affect or be an issue at the middle school? And then you might have seen, I guess we were having an email discussion with Dr. Selesnik. He said that even if a large number of high school students said that they were going to remain remote for the rest of the year, that would not facilitate or help the middle school with, creating more space, between students.
So I will try to get to the first question. So I don't think in any situation that we have looked at that we would be less than 3 feet. again, there are concerns maybe around an art room right now. I'll just, give you a little insight into the micro pieces that we're talking about right now. Some of our tables in our art rooms are large enough. They're 5 by 4. 5 feet doesn't really help us. You might be able to put kids on one end, which would make them 3 feet apart, kind of like head to head, 3 feet apart. But that 4-foot distance at the front of the table really hurts us, because then we can't have as many rows as we need, or a table is going a foot or a foot and a half or 2 feet into that travel space between rows. So those are the types of things we're talking about. But, we are already, I'll just say this for everyone, we are already doing our best to kind of like squirrel desks and tables and everything we can away close to areas in each of the buildings, so that when we are able to make this move, we can make it quickly. The complicated piece here is that right now at 6 feet, we only have to do masks. So if we were to restage our classrooms right now and put everything at 4 feet in preparation, we would actually lose out on spaces in our classroom, because then students would have to be 8 feet from each other head to head. And so we'd lose, 20% of our capacity in each classroom. So we can't stage until we have the barriers. But then once we get the barriers, we have to stage and put up the barriers on each of our desks. So that's going to be a mad dash once we're ready there. So, we did talk about how could we do this kind of thing? How could we be ready? And there really just is no great answer, except, like squirrels in the wintertime, we're just making rooms full of desks and tables and whatever we can, so that we are ready when it's time to get the barriers. And then the other question was about the high school. It's not something we've considered yet. Again, I believe that we are going to be able to fit all of our students at 3 or more feet. And again, our average likely at the middle school would be 4 feet from head to head. Again, the CDC does not clarify. The only thing they clarify is less than 6 feet, you need a barrier. So 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, 5.5 feet, 5 feet, 11 inches, doesn't matter, you need a barrier. So that is what we are going on. And again, there are some just there's some desks and things that put us really close. And so we're trying to think outside the box and say, okay, what if we make a bank of tables here so the aisles are on the outside, so that we really can maximize those 4 feet given the tables or whatever we have in a classroom. So some classrooms might have to turn 90 degrees the other way, just because students fit better that way than they have all year. So again, that's the level of detail that we are looking at.
Thanks. I may have more questions, but I'll step to the back of the line for other people to ask questions.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just say, if there's another presentation, it's a little hard to follow all that. Might be helpful to put some diagrams in. But I guess I'll just also ask, the results of the survey that we filled out, are they binding? Or if we go through this, if we change our mind, do we get another opportunity to say whether we'll be in full time or out?
Yeah, so that's I think a very important question that I would imagine a lot of you are thinking around. Once we have the commitment to make space for all students to come back, then all students can come back. We're making every effort right now to make sure that we have the right data to make the right decisions. And it's our goal to allow all students to come back, but obviously we have to wait for our survey data to tell us if that's even something that the community is expecting. I would think, again, based on the communication I've received, our secretaries have received, our counselors have received, that more people would like their children back year round, or 5 days a week, or 4 days a week, or whatever it would be. So that is how we are operating. And you can hear kind of in the things I've shared already, the work that we're doing in order to make sure that that is successful as quickly as we can. Getting back to some of the other questions that have come up, even the traffic question that has come up a couple of times. The other important thing I think to highlight here is our superintendent has talked about a phase-in plan. So we may phase in again, this is not a guarantee, but it's definitely on the table. We may phase in a grade at a time to see what happens with traffic, to see what happens with community spread, to see what happens along the way. So we probably wouldn't be in the position to bring everybody back at the same time, but if it happens to work out that way, then it happens to work out that way. If we can get some of those other things that you can hear that we're concerned about with traffic, et cetera, in the process. So to me, it makes sense to bring our sixth graders back first. They're the littlest bodies coming through our building. So, it does make sense to have them back first and then phase up to 7 and 8. But again, if we get survey data that says only 60% of our eighth graders are going to come back, then it might make sense to start with eighth grade. So again, we'll see what our survey data shares with us before making those next questions. Maybe hard to answer, but what is the likelihood that school will be ready to make this happen in May? Again, you can hear we've already started the conversation. Again, I think that the survey data that we are going to get that closes out tomorrow. So if you haven't done your survey, please do so. The data that we're going to have is going to help us drive that. But again, then there is a purchasing of barriers. There's a lot of things that then need to happen. I know that we were in a really great place to leave a majority of our furniture in our building this year. We used our stage. We had a couple of classrooms that we could put things in the back of. The other schools were not that lucky, so they had to ship everything to Lewisboro. So getting everything back onto the campus and then putting it in a place to squirrel it away there does complicate things, and it is a process. So again, my understanding is that we're making every effort to get it ready as soon as we can. And I think after April break is when that's kind of like when the door is open. And then once we can get things in, whether it's a phase in or everybody back after that time, that seems to be the way that we are trending right now. But if for some reason we can't get barriers for 2 months, that obviously holds us up. So that's the complication, I think, of all of this. Sorry, Taryn, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, there was a question a little bit earlier in the chat that said, any thoughts on lockers for students? What about lunch in the cafeteria?
So lockers, probably not. Again, when we think about students congregating, the data talks about 10 or more minutes over the course of the day that you have with other people. So we don't know if students go to their lockers, et cetera. We can see if they're in classrooms together, and we can make our best decisions from there. So I think we've lived the lockerless piece of this year. I don't think that we would make that change now. So again, maybe, I'm not going to rule it out, but I can't imagine that we would want to go back on that. I will tell you in past years that I was here, then Taryn, I'm just going to ask you to repeat that other part of the question. But in past years when I was here, the eighth graders have always wanted to carry their backpacks around. It's been kind of like a rite of passage here after April break. So everyone's going to have, I think the hardest part is going to be going back to lockers next year. Students having to decide, what they're going to carry, not in a backpack, et cetera. What was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
The second part was asking about the possibility of lunch in the cafeteria.
Yeah, so our cafeteria right now is being used for band. So the only way that we can fit our band students and our chorus students are actually in a half of the gym. The requirements for band and chorus are different than our other classes. So because you are, singing loudly or playing an instrument, the requirement is that you have to be 12 feet away from other people. So we are using our largest spaces for that. I know at the high school, they've started to talk about, they're going to be using their cafeteria, taking seating charts, They will be using barriers in their cafeteria, et cetera. We will just have kids in the classroom with the barriers at 4 feet. Other questions that people might have? Will the students be wearing masks during chorus? Yes, that is what is happening right now. Based on the guidance, we don't have to do that. Most of our students feel more comfortable. I don't know, it's because they don't want to sing. They just keep their mouths covered. But they are covering their mouths right now. There is an option to take off your mask, and the same thing in band. We do actually have little covers that go on the bell of a saxophone, a trumpet, et cetera, to stop the spread. We don't have to do that at 12 feet, but we're doing that. It was a commitment, and our band teacher, Mrs. Frazek, actually bought masks with a spot where the lips can come through when the students are playing. So they're masked the rest of the time. So again, just some of the little things you might not know about that we're doing this year if your children aren't taking that. But modified sports in the spring, a bit off topic. I don't think it's off topic. So there is talk about it. Again, I don't want to make any commitment to modified spring. I know right now for our athletics department, providing our seniors and our juniors with the opportunity to play varsity sports is the top priority, I believe, for the district and for the other districts in our section. And at the same time, for us at least, for those of you who have been on with me before, hopefully you know how important after school activities are. So providing an opportunity for something like a track or something like that. We have over 100 students every year in our spring track program. It's something I'd love to be able to do, but can we do it safely with 100 kids spaced out correctly with condensed varsity programs all happening at the same time? I don't know. I will tell you that is not our top priority now. Our top priority is to make sure that we are set up for the 9 periods of a day that we have here in the building with students. But if you ask Chris McCarthy, his answer might be very different in terms of what his priorities are. So definitely something, I don't know if you saw, we had a student who was highlighted in a local paper the other day, Max Goodman. Max started running track when he was here. And he's super successful. And again, to not provide that opportunity for our students would be a shame. But again, given that we are still in a pandemic, it is understandable. Something has come in here about staggered dismissal and end times. That's a very interesting question. Right now, basically, I'm just looking up at the schedule. Our building opens at 7:55. And at 8 o'clock, we start our classes. We go until 2:38, and then students start getting on the buses to go home. So in order to do a staggered entrance and dismissal, it's a little more complicated. I know it works well at the elementary schools because students are in one class all day. So they can just call out, the students riding the bus or the students who are being picked up by a parent. It gets a little more complicated here, and we are moving throughout the day. Could we add time on and hold? I would imagine we could. I'm not sure that the window is any better with the complication of so many people picking up and all the buses that need to leave the campus, but it's something it will bring up to our security consultant. So it's a good suggestion because I've seen it a couple of times. Clarify our responses on the surveys being binding. We saw that as well as preliminary feedback. When will our responses be considered final? Ooh. This is like being a proctor instead of the person who made the test. My understanding is that we're collecting this to make our decisions moving forward, but you all know you're putting your child's name, et cetera there. So if we did need to follow up, we could. But I think we're asking for a commitment for the rest of the year, April through June. So I would think that I mean, binding is a legal term, so I don't think that there's going to be any legal pieces here, but you know, giving us your best thoughts at the time is definitely going to help us make some decisions. So we wouldn't want like false information to be guiding us, because we will be pouring ourselves heavily into the results of this survey.
I have a quick question, and this might be something that the district office, I should direct it to the district office, but I know we're talking about doing this post spring break. Is it being, you know, built in the fact people might be traveling, so we're not bringing people back right after the break, that it would be?
I did see that before. It is, I don't believe so. Again, I think that there are, I did not read it, but I know that the governor did change the travel ban in some way. It was modified in some way recently. I know that people can test. I know you have to test before you leave where you're going, and then test, I think, 2 times within 4 days or something like that before coming back. But I don't think so. That's a really good question. And then how soon will the survey results be shared? I don't know that question. I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry. My guess is that the district office will look at them. I'm sure they'll be shared with the board to make some decisions. I'm sure they'll be shared with administrators around the district to help make decisions for their schools. I don't know what the public sharing is going to look like. I do not know. Are we allowed to know what portion of the teachers and building staff have been vaccinated at this time? I don't know if you're allowed to know. I know that the numbers nationally are sneaking up to around 10% now. I believe that New York is ahead of some of the other people. I know that some of our staff members are, a lot of people I've spoken to have gotten it. I'm fully vaccinated, super excited about that. I don't know though. I don't think it's a requirement for employment yet. And nor do I know where that will go, to be honest with you. Does the district require the tests before returning to work? So there's a question here about spring break. Do teachers who travel during spring break? Yeah. So we have one circumstance that I'm aware of, and the teachers have to follow the protocol as outlined by CDC in New York State if they are going to travel. And that is something that does continue to come out from our superintendent, what those expectations are around travel, making sure that you're tested. Again, voluntary travel is different than required travel. So if you had a parent sick, it's a different situation than I wanted to go to Cancun. So those are definitely weighed differently. Okay, other questions that people might have? So are fully vaccinated teachers or staff required to quarantine? Great question. So we are, those of us who are fully vaccinated, after 2 weeks, you get a 90-day window. That is the current understanding. So once you're fully vaccinated, it is just like if you've actually had coronavirus, you get 90 days from the end of your core, actually from the date it started, that if you happen to be in a room where you are quarantined, you do not have to quarantine. So that is the going guidance there for now. Again, for those of us who are fully quarantined, we're hoping it goes past 90 days. I did hear a little bit on my way in this morning about will that be extended? So I know that the doctors are starting to look at, can it be more than 90 days? for those people who are fully vaccinated. But right now, it's 90 days. I'm coming up with some good questions today. I see a hand on iPhone.
Hi, Jeffrey. Sorry, it's Claire again. Could you just clarify again on the, when you said the most crowded problem to solve was in the art rooms? I know in that time slot, it rotates between, I think, art, technology, and is it health? Is it just when the kids are doing art, or is it just in that room, no matter what's going on during the rotation?
Yeah, it really has to do this. The spacing is not an issue for me, but with our current tables in there, again, normally we have 2 students per table, but with having to do at least 4 feet, et cetera, it's just a spacing issue. It's a geometry problem at this time. So we're seeing what did somebody call it the other day? It's like Tetris. So you're trying to fit in the right amount of things correctly. So again, it's just it's a concern that we have right now. It's like, how are we going to solve art? Because 90% of our other classrooms we have solutions to right now. But it's like those one-offs with, when you have a 3x4 desk next to a 4x5 desk next to a 3x6 desk, how do you make all of that work? While still maintaining our safety expectations for fire drills, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just a lot of different compounding variables, but I will tell you, for those of you who don't know our head custodian, Dave Cook, he is awesome with this kind of stuff. And so are all of our nighttime people. Dave and Greg work so hard during the day, and they're looking forward to getting this all solved and saying, okay, what's next? Because that's just the kind of people they are.
Right. So, but my question is, thanks for that. What I was just trying to understand, is it only an issue if your child has art during the rotation, right? Because they don't have art year round. So if your child doesn't have art for the rest of the year, is it a concern for that student? In other words, is it only for art, or is it whenever they're in that room, regardless of whether they're doing art? I just don't know how the classrooms are used, art, technology, health, whatever the rotation is.
So again, it is not a concern for our students. Our students will be 3 to 4 feet with barriers. We're going to fit everybody in there. I'm just sharing with you what we're currently working on as far as a spacing in our art room as an example. So nothing to worry about on your end.
Thanks.
Sure. See some of the other things that we are, considering, wanting to make sure that our easy screener line, that may get a little bit longer. So these are, again, I just wanted to share with you some of the things that we are thinking about students who do not complete our easy screener. Again, we're doubling up that line. Students may be a little bit late to class. Hopefully, people will continue to do that at home, which is awesome. Again, once we're set up, everyone can come back. Again, I think that summarizes a lot of it. We are starting to work on, like I mentioned before, with resets, just a plan for what that's going to look like. We do have our entire backfield, and again, we can paint lines or something like that. We do have the upper field as well. So we may just need to spread our groups out so that they can play accordingly. But I know that we're looking forward to getting our PE classes back out as much as possible. A couple of teachers share with me today, we're going outside today. So I know that everybody is really looking forward to the nicer weather coming out. Okay, other questions that people have? Oh, geez, 50 minutes already. Doesn't feel like that long. Yeah, Lizzie, go ahead.
Do you have any other updates on the Regents exams? I know Dr. Selesnik mentioned it last week that now they might actually happen. So I'm wondering about earth science.
I only have disappointing news as far as the Regents. Right now, my understanding, and I think that there's another meeting early next week to make some final decisions. But in the latest thing that I read, there were going to be some sort of regents given. We don't have any more information than that. I know we're looking at algebra and earth science, probably being on that list. It's unfortunate, I think, but again, our students do very well. So I'm not, and I know that our teachers have continued to work on curriculum over the course of the year. Again, it's unfortunate, I think, that it sounds like the national government did not allow us to get our waiver, but again, all that kind of stuff is out of our hands. So our students will do well, as they always do. And then we will make adjustments when we have the final word from the state.
Thanks.
Yep. Just it's a bummer, just as an aside, for me at least, it's a bummer when we think about the emotional health and wellness of our kids, you guys at home and us in school, and to think about coming out of the pandemic. We are meeting, our admin guidance team meets a lot. In fact, we have Wellness Week coming up next week. You hear a little more about at the end of this week. And to think about that accountability measure and testing, it's just a bummer as far as I'm concerned. We think about this kind of thing just hanging out there at the end of the year for accountability, when we're more worried about kids coming back from the pandemic, worried about being safe, worried about their family being safe, families worrying about their kids being safe. You can hear, I think, probably my disappointment is. Anyway. All right, so again, I'm happy to stay on if you would like, but I appreciate everybody taking the time and spending it with us this morning. I will put out something just as soon as it is on the district calendar. I'll just put out a save the date for next Wednesday night. May run it more as a webinar format so that we can just see the questions that are posted and go from there. But it depends on the what we're able to do at that time. So again, thank you so much for those of you who have spent some time with us today. Hopefully you've learned a little bit. If you do have any follow-up questions, please continue to send those to me, email them to me. Taryn, if people want to email them to me, you can send them to me as well. Every question helps us at least say, ooh, we hadn't thought about that, or oh, that I feel good because we do have a plan for that. So your perspective on that is much better to add to it rather than keep it to yourself. Please continue to send away. All right.
Definitely. Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
so much. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you.
Spanowitz, for taking all the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it. And definitely feel free to email me if you would like. I can always pass things on. So no problem at all.
Awesome.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.